Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healers specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Hello and welcome to episode 336 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. I am Rory and my guest today is Nicola Durrant, an autism specialist, teacher and consultant who is also the mother of an autistic daughter. She has worked as a special educational needs coordinator, also known as a SENCO, for 8 years and as a specialist advisor for teachers for 13 years. In addition, she trained as a dyslexia assessor and earned a master's degree in autism, further deepening her expertise in supporting neurodivergent individuals. Today, she will offer valuable insights into working with clients who experience pathological demand avoidance, also known as PDA, shedding light on their challenges and the most effective ways of supporting them. So with that said, let's roll the intro.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 336 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Both my colleague Rory Oakes and myself, Ken Kelly, are delighted to welcome you to our 3 topics today, starting with ethical sustainable practice, where it's a good topic. It's talking about building your counselling curriculum vitae, your CV for getting work within counselling. And you're going to really like the handout that we have on that as well. It's really, really detailed. We're then going to Practice Matters, where Rory has already teed up the interview with Nicola Durrant, identifying and working with pathological demand avoidance. Really interesting topic. And then we go into student services, recognising you, the students, on your formal journey to become a counsellor or a psychotherapist, and we're speaking about reviewing a client's progress. So, Rory, let's dig into that ethical sustainable practice. Counsellor CV, curriculum vitae, the big word. It's an interesting document, isn't it? It's the document that opens the doors.
Yes, there's an old saying, and it goes something like, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And your CV is that chance to make a good impression. If you're applying for a job, they usually ask for some kind of curriculum vitae, a kind of overview of your experience, your qualifications, who you are as a person, what hobbies you may have. And creating a CV can be a little bit daunting. Certainly if someone has never written a CV before. So we produced this handout, which is going to be really helpful for those who are looking to get paid work, and hopefully it'll be able to really get your CV sparkling in front of recruiters. And I think even if you're not pursuing a career in counselling, you may have, got your counselling qualification. I may think, I'd like to do something kind of running alongside support work or any other job really that would use counselling skills. And I think being able to put together a curriculum vitae is going to be really helpful and give you the best chance really of getting a job, because it's very competitive out there, Ken.
It is very competitive. And I think that your CV as a counsellor is going to look and feel very different to CV of maybe a different kind of career. And I say that because I changed careers, and a lot of counsellors and psychotherapists do change careers. And I recognized that the CV I had for my old sales director position had very little value if I was going to an agency and saying, I would like to come and work within your agency. And I had to be very smart in going through and looking at what are the skills that I used to use that are transferable now into this new CV. But you've kind of identified what somebody might be looking for in a CV. And we start off with interpersonal skills. So there's an opportunity for me to bring my old relationship building within sales into my new CV, because that is an interpersonal skill. It's talking to people and holding conversations. So there is value in what you've done in the past. It's just smartly transferring that to a counselling setting, and rather than just putting it in as a list of jobs that we used to do. And then understanding of standards and ethics. That's an important one, Rory. You know, in counselling and psychotherapy, we work to standards and ethics. We join an ethical body. We work to an ethical framework. Weaving into your CV your understanding of standards and ethics is going to only serve you because the person that is reading that wants an ethical practitioner to be working within their organization. Self-awareness. You know, that's got nothing to do with a counseling course you did or a bit of CPD that you might have done. Self-awareness, but it is important for counseling and psychotherapy, and it's something that you can bring into your CV, any kind of personal development work that you do, showing that you are self-aware. Your commitment to learning and to personal and professional development. There's another area that you can bring in that sits outside of your qualifications and what you've done. So commitment to learning, you might be a member of the Counselling Tutor CPD library and mention CPD that you're doing, or that you do regular CPD. But what the employer might be looking for is that you are committed to learning. Specifically, if you're going into an agency or an organization that works in a very niche area, specialism area, they might be wanting to know that you are going to continue to train in those areas. And then, and I think this is really important for counselors and psychotherapists, your mental toughness and perseverance, because it's a challenging role, Rory. And I guess if I was an agency owner and I was looking for a counsellor to come in, I would want someone who is robust, somebody who knows how to take care of themselves and will be able to stand up to the rigors of everyday practice. And those are areas that don't even touch on the studies that you did or the level of studies that you did or how many hours you've practiced, but all really, really valuable things to pop into your CV, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And one other thing that you could add in is any research that you've done. We're finding more and more now that agencies and organisations are research based, and the reason for that is because they draw down funding from the government usually, and the government want evidence of effectiveness. So if you can say that say for instance you've done a course in trauma-informed practice and you are researching trauma, that's going to be mightily attractive to an organisation that is working with trauma, that is basically supporting clients who've had traumas. Because if you can evidence what research you did, even if it's only at university level or college level, it shows that your ability to be able to take information, look at it, analyze it, and come up with a conclusion. And this is, I think, a very helpful trait in modern charities, because they're all research based and they're all looking to justify the money they're getting from the government. So any research you've done is always a bonus, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I know that one of the ethical bodies in the United Kingdom is about to hold its research conference, and it will be packed because it's important and it underpins what we do and how we practice as counsellors. So if you're showing any kind of research, and that might even be a small research project that you did at a level 5. It doesn't have to have been a master's degree research piece of work. It's just showing your ability to understand research and undertake research in a methodical way. So we're talking about this CV now, and I'm working from the handout, and we will give you the address of this handout, and this is going to be one you definitely want to get because it's really comprehensive and it breaks it down. We're going to start off by going through 4 areas that are identified as being important when you're looking at your CV as a counsellor or a psychotherapist. And the first one is planning the content. You know, we do the plan first, the pencil out the plan of what this is going to look like. Then the structuring of that content within a CV in a way that it's going to make sense to the person that you're handing that over to. And then this is an important one. It is the adding of a covering letter. And this covering letter, you'll see when we get to it, might be different for each CV that you submit. It's going to show how you are relevant and how your qualifications are relevant to the opportunity that is open that you're putting your CV in against. And then checking and getting feedback. And I think this is an important one, you know, having somebody read over it, somebody saying, oh, there's a typo. I would have structured that differently. Getting feedback from your peers. They may say, oh, but what about this that you did? You haven't put that in there. And it really can be helpful getting that feedback. But let's start off with the planning of the content, Rory. And I know that we've kind of put some possible content that you might consider putting in. And it's going to be your qualifications, your work experience, any CPD training you've got, your skills and the knowledge that you hold is going to, I guess, be the content. But it's about how that gets put together and how you look at that, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you need to start off with the most important things first. Any recruiter is going to be a very, very busy person, and they don't want to wade through huge amounts of documents trying to find out about you. So if you can put your experience and knowledge and you really in a very concise A4 page, you're going to get again have an advantage. So start off with your name and a little bit about yourself, contact details, where you live, how you can be contacted, your qualifications, plus any other qualifications from previous work. So, Ken said, as he said, he was a sales director for a company. I was a sales manager. And there's quite a lot of transferable skills there, in terms of filing reports, getting to places on time, turning up on time. So there's quite a few things that you can bring over from your previous work, which leads us into work experience. And you can talk about your responsibilities. And what's really good, I think, you start off working, in a cake shop, as a lot of people do. They start off in kind of shop roles. And then you start off as a shop assistant, then you end up as the supervisor, and then you move on, and then you become the manager. That shows that a progression of work, but also shows that someone has looked on you and thought, we can promote this person to do different things. So, even if you've got a very humble work record, don't be afraid of using it. And then, of course, CPD training. We've talked a lot about 21st century counsellors, and I think that a lot of employers would want something like being trauma informed. If the role requires you to work on a telephone, then online and telephone counselling. So I think it's really important that you talk about your CPD or any other kind of specialist interest you might have. You might have a special interest that you keep looking at. It could be, for instance, working with people who have been divorced. It might be that you're really interested in that and you're developing a bit of a research around that. And then professional membership. I think it's always important that you talk about your professional memberships and put those in, because that shows that you're a committed professional, that you've joined a professional body and are accountable to them. And, again, that is something that employers are looking for. Ultimately, any employer is looking for accountability, Ken.
Oh, very much so. It'll probably be in the job description that is a prerequisite. Something interesting. This comes from, we've been speaking about, it's interesting that we both share sales roles in the past. And there's one thing that we learn in sales and marketing that we learn again in counseling. So listening to this, this is going to make sense to you. Whose frame of reference are we in when we are in a counseling session? We're in the client's frame of reference. And it's the same with sales. When somebody comes in to buy something, you want to be in the customer's frame of reference. You'll be more successful as a salesperson there. Now, here's the tip. The same is true if you're putting your CV together. It's not about what you want to tell them and that list of things. Think more, what is it that they want to hear from me? Look at the job description. Go and look at their website. Understand who they are and say, what is it they... Put yourself in their frame of reference. What do you think it is that they are looking for? And how can I take that I have, my experience, structure in such a way that it meets their frame of reference? And I think something else here, we've gone through beautifully as well, that you need your qualifications, your work experience, your CPD training, your skills, your knowledge in there. But there's another secret ingredient that is going to make you stand out from your peers that put in their CVs alongside yours. And that is, bring yourself. Because here's the thing. When you're training to become a counselor, you're going to be looking at yourself very, very closely. You're going to be writing assignments about your personal and self-development through your arc of training. Well, it's important. Self in counseling is ultimately important. So bring your true congruent self into your CV as well. Weave who you really are within that, because that's where you become unique. That's where you stand out from your peers. And I
Absolutely,
guess, we speak sometimes about students and going into placement, and how we reassure students that you have valuable knowledge and insights because you're just graduating, so you've got all the latest training and you're just about to go out into the workforce, and you are a win to anybody that you might work for. And the same is true even if you've been counseling for 15 years. When we're going in, sometimes we can view the job application process of, they hold all the cards, they are the mighty job holder, and I am just one of people standing in a line here to get the job. The truth is, you want not just a job in counseling. You want the right job that matches your values and who you are. And I think that is worth, in some way, weaving into your CV. And it might be, what kind of a company are you looking to work within? In the same way as they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them, and you can start that in your CV. I value a team that is blah, blah, blah. I work best within an environment that is blah, 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 blah. Speak about your values, because it's going to hit and resonate with the right agency. They're going to go, hey, this is us. This is us. We work like that. This person will fit in beautifully here. So it's important to find a job, but it's more important to find the right job, the one that's going to resonate and fit for you.
Absolutely. And I think the value match is important from the perspective of the candidate. If the company's values don't fit yours, you're going to have a pretty miserable time, and you're not going to get any kind of longevity in the work, because your values will be tested, and eventually you'll say, I just can't do this anymore. I've known a few colleagues who've left jobs because it didn't align with their values. They just went in one day and handed the notice in and said, I'm leaving because your values don't align with mine, and I can't do this anymore. I really can't. And I think, integrity is a cornerstone of our profession. And, the friend of mine who did that, I said, congratulations, you might not have a job, but at least you know you've done the right thing. And, you can put that on your CV. You can say, I left the last job because I just didn't feel their values were that of supporting clients, if you could do that. I want to touch on just something I know that I tend to suffer with is your CV being perfect. And it has to be absolutely perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect CV. There really isn't. And I think at some point you have to just send it. So, don't just hold on to it and go, oh, it's going to be perfect. And, I'll rewrite this and I'll rewrite that. At some point, you have to send it because there's be a deadline. They're not going to wait forever, the employer. And, if you are, like myself, Ken, dyslexic, get someone to look over it. And, there's a plethora of support you can get online now. I use Grammarly. I also use Word. Word's very good now. It'll correct your spelling. So you can get a lot of help just with online apps, and send it away. And the other thing I would say is that you'll probably, it's a good policy to have a copy of your CV and have a look at it before you go for the job, because almost certainly the employer will ask you about things on your CV, and if you can answer that very confidently and in depth, that gives you a better chance.
100%, yeah, and that the CV becomes the basis for the interview. They will be referring to it and asking you questions around it. And that's why they ask questions. That's why it's interesting to put things like your hobbies or your interests within your CV. And if they can link in some way to self-care, instead of calling them hobbies and interests on your CV, you can say my self-care activities, horse riding, taking a walk, walking the dog. It just frames it differently. And this is what this is about. How do you stand out from the other 10 CVs that are on the desk? Rory's given you one super good tip, and I want to re-emphasize it. Make it short. That's what I want to say here. A CV is not going to buy you a job. You're not going to send in a CV. They're going to look at your CV and go, whoa, oh man, this is it. This is the candidate for us. The CV has got one job only, and it's to open the door to the interview, to create intrigue for them to go, I want to speak to this person. That's where you sell yourself to get the job, not in your CV. Your CV has one job, get you in front of the interviewer. So make it short, because there's nothing worse than being the employer. And I say this because I was a sales director, and we would have a sales position come open, and then I would have 15, 20 CVs that I had to pile through. And when it was 7-8 pages long, I just zoned out, because I'm only human. No matter how amazing this person was. So say that Rory's big top tip there is make it short. Make it as short as you can to get the information over. And then the second top tip is make it personal. So we've said, bring yourself into this. And a great place to do that is in your cover letter. So the cover letter has got one job only. Like the CV's got the job to get you in the chair in front of the interviewer. Your cover letter has one job, and its job is to create intrigue in the person for them to actually want to read your CV. If your covering letter is not compelling enough, you can be dismissed without your CV actually being seen. They can look over the cover letter and go, you know what, that's not really what we're looking for. That's not a fit for us. And a great tip on cover letters, that this is a personal tip. So this is not a universal truth. This is my thinking. And it's my thinking from having to go through CVs before. Is if you can, within your covering letter, stand out, be different, and resonate with the person who's reading it, you've got yourself a winner. You're on to starting on a winning foot. That might be something like, I'm going to give you an example now. I am sending in my CV to Counselling Towers. I might start off with, I know that it's going through to Rory. I might start off with, Rory, I love your work. I've been listening to your podcast for years, and it's literally changed my life. I would love to work with you in your organization, and I hope that this CV kind of puts over the information that will put me in a seat in front of you. I want to be there. I want to have this interview. I know I'm going to fit in great with your team. You know, that's a great cover letter, because its only job is to get the person to go, oh, okay, who is this person? And of course, it would be dependent on what job you're looking for. So an example, you know, you mentioned CPD, Rory, and the importance of that. We've got the Counsellor CPD library. If you go into the Counsellor CPD library and put in a topic, you're going to see CPD on it, because it's just full of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of experts talking about their area of specialism. So let's say I was going to go and work in a agency, and they were dealing with neurodivergence, and I would go and do a little bit of CPD before even writing the cover letter, so that I could maybe weave that in and say, you know, it's coincidentally, I've just finished doing some CPD on this area. This is an area that deeply interests me. So showing that you want to be a match, that you are a match, and there's nothing wrong within your cover letter saying that you actually want the job, instead of it just being this professional letter that says, I am hereby applying for such a job. Stand out, be different, be you. That's your cover letter. We've got an example of the cover letter as well in the handout. Asking for feedback, we've already kind of gone through that, Rory. You know, once you've got your CV sorted, pop it out to a few peers, ask them what they think, and get their feedback on it. Any further thoughts or final thoughts on CV as a counsellor, Rory?
Well, I mean, I think developing a CV is a good discipline, and if you are unsuccessful in your quest for the job, get feedback, ask why, and that might be something that you could put into your CV. You can put it into your CV. I'm with Ken on this. I think that the CV isn't a passport to a job. The CV is a door opener, and then the interview is the crucial element, really. They look at your CV and they go, this person may be interesting, and then what they do is they call you in for an interview, and at that point, that's your time to shine. But don't be afraid of a CV. Get someone to check it over, and always keep it updated. So the more CPD you do, or the more qualifications, or if you change your ethical body, just keep your CV updated so it's fresh and always ready to go.
Like it. So you can get the super duper handout, 12 pages long, all about building your counselling CV. It's free. You just go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab, go to episode 336. That's today's episode, and you can download that from within that page. I also mentioned in this episode the Counselling Tutor CPD library. If you're a member of that, of course, you can log in. If you're not a member of that, just go to counsellingtutor.com and all the information is there. Hundreds of topics to choose from on CPD there. So that is building your counselling CV. We now move on to Practice Matters, Rory, where you have interviewed, it's Nicola, isn't it? Nicola Durrant, and speaking about pathological demand avoidance, something that I know firsthand from myself.
And me.
It's an interesting topic, and I think it's something we certainly need to know as counsellors, psychotherapists, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. I think that when we're working, certainly with autistic people, we need to consider all of who they are and how they present. And pathological demand avoidance sometimes gets a bad press. The idea that some people just won't do something and they're just being awkward. So we got an expert in, Nicola Durrant, and what we did was I interviewed her, and she's given a really insightful observation and interview on this. And this is what she had to say.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counselor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com.
Pathological demand avoidance, also known as PDA, is an autistic trait often misunderstood as awkwardness or oppositional behaviour. In reality, it is a deeply anxiety-driven need to avoid demands, even if the individual generally wants to meet them. Misconceptions are common. PDA is often misinterpreted as manipulation, seen as a lack of motivation, or even dismissed altogether. Traditional discipline strategies tend to backfire, and masking can make the struggles of PDA individuals nearly invisible. Today, we are joined by Nicola Durrant, a special educational needs coordinator, also needs a SENCO, with a master's degree in autism. She will help us explore how pathological demand avoidance appears in daily life and discuss the most effective ways to support those who experience it. Nicola, you're very welcome.
Thank you, Rory. Thank you for having me.
So, first of all, just a little bit of a personal exploration. I wondered what inspired you to work with people who have special educational needs. What kind of got you to that place?
It started back in 1997 when I qualified as a teacher, and I started working in a primary school, year 3. And by the end of that first year, I remember just thinking it's the kids with special needs that really do something for me. They were just the most amazing kids to be around. And in my second year of teaching, the SENCO vacancy within the school became available. So the SENCO role within any school is a senior leader that's in charge of special needs and the provision that young people have in mainstream. And I remember saying to my head teacher at the time, could I have that position? And he said, you're 23, absolutely. What do you know? You've done a year of teaching. And I just said, honestly, this is where my passion lies. Just let me have a go at this role. And he did. He put his faith behind me. And I did that role for 8 years across 2 different settings. And it was the best thing I ever did, because I just knew, as I say, that people with special needs, neurodivergent young people are just the most amazing, people in the world. And then after the 8 years of being a SENCO, I was then lucky enough to get a job in Essex Local Authority Advisory Services. So I worked then as a specialist teacher consultant, working alongside schools really to provide staff training. I would go in and work alongside young people, recommend things for the school to put in place, help formulate EHCPs, all of that kind of thing, just a sort of consultancy service. Initially, I started working with young people that were dyslexic. So the local authority trained me to be a dyslexia teacher and a dyslexia assessor. And it was only in the first couple of years, I just remember having young people on my caseload that had autism traits. And I said to my manager, I don't know anything about this condition. Help me out here, because it's a word that's bandied around and I don't know how to support these kids properly. And Essex funded my master's degree in autism. And I did that while still working full time within Essex, and the rest is history. I just then swapped straight over to the autism advisory services and stayed there till the end of my time in Essex, which was 2019. Then I left the local authority when they had a restructure. I took voluntary redundancy, set up my own special needs consultancy at the beginning of 2020, but obviously, we then went into lockdown. So the way to make a living during that time, Rory, was to do online training webinars. So 5 years on, I now run an online training company. I still do lots of consultancy work. I'm still out and about there in schools and families, but I split my time between consultancy and obviously doing online autism training. So,
well, there you go. That's a very complete sort of biography from you. And I just wonder, when we're talking about autistic traits, one of them is pathological demand avoidance. It sounds very medical, but what actually is pathological demand avoidance? How might we see it presented?
Okay, right. I'm going to take you back a few steps, because one of the first slides I do in my PDA training, I always say to people, what we are first and foremost dealing with the PDA stuff, the pathological demand avoidance, we are dealing with autistic individuals. The PDA bit is the behavioural profile and how it manifests to the outside world, and it looks very different for PDA than it does for somebody that just has what I call a textbook diagnosis of being autistic. So that's really the only difference. So our first thought is that our young people are autistic. So we need to understand autism and the profile. Like I say, the PDA bit, it just presents in a more challenging, more extreme way. And for our young people, it's the emotional regulation. It's them kind of regulating the responses they have to people and situations that they find themselves in. And it's just harder for us to understand it and deal with it, because our young people often behave in such an extreme way. People will look and go, oh, they're ADHD, or they've got a conduct disorder, or because quite often our kids don't present as being autistic in the same way that we understand an autism profile to traditionally be.
Okay, so how might that look? You say they don't, when we talk about autism, we say once you met one autistic person, you met one autistic person. But when you talk about the difference in profile, what exactly does that look like?
The profile internally is still the same. So anybody that's autistic, whether they've got the PDA element or not, they still have difficulties, differences with social communication and social understanding. So it's the interactions that they have with other people, the differences in their sensory profile are still there, the differences in how they see the world in terms of it being very black and white, very rigid thinking, all of that is still there. The main difference is that for our young people with PDA, it's the levels of anxiety that they are dealing with that is significantly higher than those young people that just have an autism diagnosis. And it is a crippling level of anxiety that they are dealing with. And when our young people get really heightened and really stressed, what it is, it's that central nervous system that's going in overdrive. And our young people go very much into that fight, flight or freeze mode very, very quickly. So with things like simple demands that we place on our kids, it might look like they are refusing to do something. It might be that they just want the control, or they're being manipulative. That's a name that's often bandied out. But it's to do with this very much organic process that's going on internally, to do with this crippling high levels of anxiety. And that's where that pathological label comes from, because it's the anxiety that is so extreme for these young people. So it's about understanding the anxiety and those heightened levels, and actually understanding it as it's a child's central nervous system is in overdrive, and they just go into that survival mode. And the only thing they can do is to gain control of a situation in order to bring their anxiety levels down. So the very difficult, challenging behaviours you see, it's kind of an internal sort of chemical process that's going on. It's not anything they have control over.
It seems to me like a trauma, like a trauma response to some extent, where the nervous system reacts and goes into fight, flight, or freeze mode. Would it mirror that?
Absolutely, because a lot of our young people, before they get a diagnosis, people are questioning things like, attachment issues and ADHD, but yeah, you're absolutely right. And for our kids, when their anxiety is high, it doesn't take a lot for them to be tipped over into that survival mode, and that is when you see our young people just, really hyper vigilant, and they will do anything. The avoidance strategies that you see, anything from shouting, swearing, violence, aggression, hurting themselves, they will do anything to avoid often the simple adult-led demands that we're asking them to do.
Yeah, which you would see, I guess, in someone who is going through a traumatic experience, people who are going through maybe flashbacks or some form of reenactment of an event in terms of trauma may very well present like that. I think that could be a useful comparison for therapists. So you've really covered what it's like for an individual to experience what pathological demand avoidance is. And we often talk about masking in autism. That seems to be something that's discussed a lot. What's the connection between masking and PDA? How does it contribute? What's the connection?
As any individual that's autistic, whether they're PDA or not, has the ability to mask, camouflage, hide those traits to the outside world, and almost, put a pretend mask on and behave in a way that they think society expects them to be. And that's what puts a lot of stress on our young people. They will often go into school and they've got all of this anxiety building up, and their stress bucket is getting more full as they go through the day if there are things that, they find difficult to cope and deal with. And then it's, these young people then go home and parents are having to deal with a whole range of very difficult behaviours. So you will either find young people that have sort of meltdowns and explosions and maybe violent, aggressive, or you'll have other young people that just kind of shut down and go into their own little worlds and go under a blanket for hours on end. So, and that's the main problem with the masking and camouflaging, because if nobody's realising that's what they're doing, they're just holding it in and then dealing with it at a later point in time.
Yeah, and I guess the being able to observe it and understand what's going on really relies on someone realising that person is neurodivergent. Because I guess if they don't realise the person's neurodivergent, that just probably adds to the difficulty, because I guess historically people may have seen someone avoiding doing something as being, I don't know, awkward or avoidant or as
controlling or manipulative.
My teachers used to say defiant. That was use the word du jour when I was at school. You're defiant, and I guess that kind of approach from somebody can just add to the difficulties that an autistic person has if they're being seen as deliberately being, I don't know, just awkward or avoiding. I guess if an authority figure pushes that narrative, that's going to be even harder, I guess, is it?
It is. And, the difficulty with our young people, like I say, it's a chemical, thing that's going on internally. It's organic. It's a difference in how that brain is wired. And actually our young people have no control over that. Whereas actually, if you don't know what's going on and you don't understand the PDA, like you say, you get parents and teachers thinking that these kids are making a conscious choice to be defiant or be manipulative or being controlling, and it's not. It's just their way of trying to, get hold of a situation and just bring their anxiety levels down. It's very difficult to deal with, and a lot of the consultancy work that I do, particularly in the homes, you've got parents saying that they're just different. They come home and they're just, this such difficult child that we can't deal with. And then you've got school saying, well, they're fine here. There must be a problem in the home. Yes. And actually not, because those young people, they've masked and camouflaged all day, and then they go home, which is their safe space, and they know that whoever's looking after them can deal with all this difficult stuff and will love them unconditionally. So, then you get a lot of, angst often between home and school, where school is saying, it's a home issue. And actually, no, it's not. We need to do something different in the school environment so that when they go home, they're more regulated and, they've dealt with their anxiety.
Yes, yeah. And I guess keeping in mind that this demand avoidance is almost like a trauma-led response. So I guess if anybody's engaging with that, you'd have to approach someone like they were going through some form of trauma, So when it comes to practical strategies or working with someone who's going through that cycle, what would be the best way to approach that? How might best we be of service?
I should have said before, Rory, I've got a 21-year-old daughter with a diagnosis of autism and PDA, and certainly one of the things that's helped massively over the years is for myself and her therapist to help her understand what's going on in her body so that she can start to read the signs better in terms of that anxiety build-up. And the older she's got and the more work she's done, she's more able to recognise that things are starting to, so a lot of work in terms of anxiety. What we know is that many autistic people have what we call interoception difficulties, so reading the inner body awareness signals. So it's not always easy for an autistic person to differentiate between different emotions as well. They might know that they can feel something going on in their body, but they're not always able to perhaps pinpoint that as anxiety or anger or, so there's a lot of work that needs to go on just in terms of basic understanding of emotional responses and how that feels in their bodies, really. The other thing with us, say, with the PDA, it's about working with somebody in negotiation and collaboration. Our young people don't respond well to being told what to do. They don't respond well to the whole direct demand. That can often escalate the anxiety level. So it's kind of working with them, in conjunction with them, to look at a situation and working together. That approach we know works really, really well for our kids. And often I say to class teachers, rather than giving a child a direct demand of doing something, you might say to a young person, "Oh, we need to write a Halloween story. I wonder what adjectives could we use in our opening paragraph." So you're using language like "I wonder." Oh, it would be helpful if, rather than direct. Yes. I need you.
Yes.
So it's really tailoring the language so that you're working with somebody on an even keel, on a level, rather than. Yeah,
it's about equalising power, isn't it? And, I think I would hope that most teachers took that approach to teaching. And as a teacher myself, I'd say, how do we look at this? What might be useful here, as opposed to saying, you will do. Or should I say the teaching of my past? It used to be a lot of pointing and you will do. And
it still is like that, Rory, I'm afraid.
Gosh.
Yeah. And unfortunately, with the frameworks that teachers have to work to in this country, it's so prescriptive, and there's just so much to get through in the curriculum that there's no wiggle room now in our classrooms. Yes. Any kind of creative or coming off timetable. It's very difficult for teachers now.
Yes, I'm sure it is. And as someone who's a former teacher, a former lecturer, I can really appreciate that. Do people grow out of PDA? So, as children move into adults, is it something that it will be experienced as a lifelong presentation?
With any of the neurodivergent conditions, they're lifelong. It's something you're born with. It's to do with, the differences in how your brain is wired. What we know from the research, and the research is still very, very limited with PDA, is that it's about that individual person understanding themselves and knowing actually what works for them and what doesn't, and tailoring their environment in a way that meets their needs. As I say, for an example with my daughter, she's self-employed because she knows that she's not able to take direct instruction in a workplace from a boss. We have tried that. It hasn't been successful. So for her to have control of when she works, when she earns her money, it is a much, much better pathway for her to be on. But it's like anything else, isn't it? I guess as you get older, regardless of who we're talking about, you understand yourself more and you know what you need and actually where your life is going. And that's what we know. It's not that people grow out of it, but as you get older, you know what works for you and what you need to do more of in terms of reasonable adjustments and avoiding things that don't work for you.
Absolutely. And I think what I'll take away from this interview is that although we're from different disciplines, you're a special educational needs coordinator and work with autism with children, and I'm a therapist. I think that it is about seeing someone for who they are, trying to see them as individuals, and also having some indication of what a trauma response was. I mean, most therapists would understand, or hopefully would understand, what trauma responses look like, how the polyvagal system works when we feel under threat, that flight, fight, or freeze motion that or flop, where people just disassociate. And maybe by using psychological education, and as you said, in the case of your daughter, helping them understand themselves in that process can be helpful. So, I mean, I think this has been really, really helpful. Now, your organisation, Send Station, offers CPD events for multidisciplinary professionals. And do you want to say just a little bit about that? Because I thought that was interesting. We talked about that just before we pressed the record button.
Yes, so we're an online special needs training company and have been trading now for 4 years. So I'm one of the main frontline trainers, and there are 17 other trainers that work on the platform to deliver training in their areas of neurodiversity. So we've got an occupational therapist that delivers training on dyspraxia. We've got an educational psychologist that delivers training on emotionally based school avoidance for young people with anxiety. We've got a whole range of cognition and learning sessions, dyslexia, reading, spelling. I do a whole suite of autism training. Obviously, one of those is the autism and the PDA. So they are 1.5 hour sessions that are just what we call open forum sessions, so anybody can purchase a ticket. And what I find particularly nice, particularly about the PDA sessions, it is always a mixture of school staff, parents, but other professionals. We have lots of therapists, counsellors that will often buy a ticket and join just to understand this stuff more and the profile.
Yes, and I think that the understanding of autism, certainly my experience of it, is that it's a continual learning path. There's new ideas, there's new learning. And if you want to find out about Nicola and her organisation Send Station, head over to counsellingtutor.com, click the podcast tab and look for episode 336. We'll put the website into the show notes and you too will be able to see the offerings and the support that Nicola's organisation offers. So it just goes for me to say, Nicola Durrant, thank you so much for joining us.
Massive thank you to Nicola Durrant, and of course a thank you to you, Rory, for reaching out and holding those all-important discussions and bringing us CPD within the Practice Matters section of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We now move from Practice Matters straight in to Student Services. Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Can't tell you how many times Rory and I have heard counselling students say that learning skills and knowing that they're using them effectively is really, really challenging. The reason for this is because we don't get to see another counsellor using skills in a real live session. In reality, this means that we're asked to learn something that we can never see demonstrated in a real setting, and it's no wonder that many of us are left feeling unsure. If you want to see counselling skills used in real sessions by qualified therapists, so this is real sessions, real presentations, and real use of skills, then go to counsellingskillsacademy.com. There's some free videos on skills, including a full live session that you can have a look at. Gain the competence and the confidence of knowing you're using your counselling skills effectively. Just visit counsellingskillsacademy.com. And today in Student Services, we're going to be speaking about reviewing a client's progress, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I was eternally grateful for as a student was the 6-week reviews, which we carried out roughly halfway through an engagement with a client. So I had a placement which did 12 sessions, and the 6-week review was the catching up with the client and really asking how things were going. Is anything that's changed? Is anything that they want to look at in the next 6 weeks? It doesn't have to be very formal, but it's a useful conversation piece. And there's a few things that can happen with a 6-week review. Client may take that as an opportunity to say, look, thank you very much. I think I've got all I need from this, and move on, which they may not want to do because they don't want to offend you. I've had clients who said, didn't want to offend you, so I just turned up even though I had nothing to say. So it gives the power back to the client. And also, it's incredibly useful when we come to supervision, because when we do the review, we can have a look and discuss in supervision what the client said, what has worked for them, what work is yet to be done. And also, it's a check and balance, so your supervisor can see exactly where you are in the relationship, as opposed to just going through the whole arc of 12 weeks. And I think the other thing is to remind ourselves that 6 weeks reviews are not cast in stone, Ken. You know, if you say to a client, say 2 weeks before the 6-week review, we'll have a 6-week review, and that would be in your contract. When you had your contract, you'd say at 6 weeks we do a review. But if you came in and said, I've had a terrible week, you put the review onto one side and just carry on working with the client. You don't dictate to them and say, well, I'm sorry I've had a bad week, but I had to do my 6-week review, and that's the end of it. So you tell me how things are going, and they'll say it's terrible, and you've kind of missed the point, really. So they're very, very useful, and also they're very good learning points. They're very good learning points for students. You know, you can take it into your group discussion at a university or college, and you can take it into your supervisor and gain some valuable insights. And I kind of hope that the 6-week review is still a thing, to be honest, Ken. It was a big thing.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I guess it depends where you work. You might not be offering 12 sessions. There might not be 6 weeks. If you've got 6 sessions, it might be a 3-week review. You're wanting to aim to pop that in around about halfway through the arc of counselling. And I think the important thing that kind of stood out for me, Rory, is when this is first discussed. It's first discussed when you're contracting. Yes. You explain the arc in the same way as we introduce the ending of counselling in our contracting. We might, specifically if we're working within a certain amount of sessions, we might say, well, you know, we have 6 sessions that we'll be working together, and around session 5 we'll be kind of closing that down for you. But what we will do is around about halfway through is we'll do a quick review and check where you're at and how it's all going for you. So this is in the contracting session, so that it's not a surprise when that comes up. And as you said, Rory, it's not a formal process that has to sit in a certain place at a certain time. It's going to be dependent on the client, where they find themselves, how they find themselves. Now, why do we have reviews? Well, if you've ever been out for dinner and ordered some food, when that food arrived, chances are somebody might have walked past your table and said, how's the food? Yeah. And that's a review. That's a review of your meal. And it's a common thing. And the restaurant learns from that. Even though the chef in the kitchen is following the same recipe as they always follow, they're asking you, and they're just checking in. How is it for you? How is it for you? Well, you know what? This steak's a little bit underdone. Let me sort that for you. They're going to take it away. They're going to put it back on the grill. They're going to bring it back, and it's going to be better, more suited to you. And it's the same when we're counselling. We're offering a service. And it's the client's frame of reference that we're tuning into. So not asking them or checking in with them how it's working for them and how it's going for them we're kind of missing the point. It gives us direction. It shows us what works for this client, maybe what doesn't work for this client. And what I loved the takeaway, Rory, is it gives us something to take to our supervisor, specifically if there's a challenge somewhere for the client. Also, reviews are really important for preparing for future journeys. So let's say we have got 6 sessions with this client. That's all we've got because we're working in an agency. We only have 6 sessions. And at session number 3, we check in with this client. It's the right time. They're quite happy to discuss how it's going for them in therapy. And they say to us something like, you know what? I've realized digging into this material that it goes a lot deeper than I initially thought. I think I've got a lot of childhood stuff that I'm going to need to work through now. As the counsellor, we can go, you know what, we've got 3 sessions left here. And we're not saying this out loud. We're doing this in our internal supervisor and go, this client's going to need more. Can I ask for more with my agency? Can I barter for more? Is there a referral pathway? So in the same way as it may be that the client doesn't need more, it might be that we recognize that there is a referral opportunity or that we need to see if we can extend therapy. So it really is, it's in service of the client. And the review is going to be different with every client. It really is. And it's also how we learn as counsellors what's working and what's not working for that specific individual. What works for one doesn't work for another. Somebody likes a rare steak, somebody else prefers it well done.
Indeed.
That's the way it is. We can't
I'm getting all hungry now.
Yeah, you get all hungry. Well, I went to a conference in the US for Counselling Tutor. And it was really interesting because I was staying in this hotel, and I said I'd like a burger. I'd like a burger, please, for my lunch. And it's the first time somebody ever said, "How would you like that burger cooked, sir?" You know, in the UK, where I am at least, and the places I go, if you ask for a burger, they just bring you a burger. They don't ask how do you want that cooked. It was just interesting. So it just shows that different people like things different ways, and we want to be checking in to that unique client where they're at to be able to best serve them. Rory.
Absolutely, Ken. And the other thing is the 6-week review isn't just for students. It's something you can carry on in your practice when you're qualified. So certainly when I was practicing, I would do a 6-week review or regular reviews, see where the client was, to get a sense of if there was any other support needed, if there was a referral needed, if my level of competence matched the presentation of the client. You know, because if a client came in and said, well, I'm hearing voices and I'm getting headaches and I'm seeing things, then maybe I wasn't the best person to see that person. Maybe that's a referral to the doctor with a consultation with the client. You wouldn't go behind the back, but you'd say, mate, have you ever thought of maybe speaking to your doctor about this, your GP, and seeing what they have to say? So it's something that really carries on into your practice. I know I used to do regular reviews when I was in practice, and it was amazing just how well they work, Ken.
Yeah, and you know, we're speaking a lot because we're speaking to students in student services. We're speaking about time-limited counselling, 6 sessions, 12 sessions. Of course, you know, you may go out and go into private practice where there's no limit to the sessions, where it can be as long as it needs to be. And then you may have a number of reviews. You may choose after 6 weeks to have a review, and then another 6 weeks later you might review again and continuously review. So we do that first of all, and very importantly, so that it doesn't go the way that Rory mentioned, where that client has kind of got what they need out of therapy, but they just don't know how to end it, and they don't want to let us down, and they probably in their mind go, well, you know, if I didn't need to go to therapy anymore, my counsellor would tell me that. You know, we don't know what's going on for them. So those reviews really, really important. So you introduce them even if you don't have time limited therapy. Now here's the tricky bit, and this is the $1 million question that I know is on the minds of the students that are listening to this. How do we do a review? And give us an example, Rory, of how we introduce the review, how we kind of start that conversation with our client, and what kind of, where we might lead with that. Are we asking them questions? How's it done?
Well, it's an interesting one, Ken. It depends on the agency. So an agency may ask you to do Core 10, which is a assessment document, or Core 30. I think there's one that's a bit more in depth, so that you can measure a client's progress. It's not unusual for agencies to use measurement tools. Core is quite a popular one, and so what you might do is you probably do a Core at the beginning. You do a core assessment at the beginning. You'd hand this document over, and it'd have a number of questions, and they tick where they felt they were, and then you could, if you're trained to use core, you could look at it and you can say, well, by your response to this, it seems to me that you're feeling a bit motivated, feeling a little bit lack of energy, and you might say yes, because core's very, very clever. It's a very clever assessment tool. It's a document, and you just get the client to read statements and tick. So you'd say to the client, so in 6 weeks we're going to do another one mid-term, just to see how things have improved. And we do it for two reasons. Really, core should be in the service of the client, so we know if the client's getting any better, if the therapy is being impactful. But usually it's done as a measurement tool for funding. A lot of agencies ask you to do Core or PHQ-9, which is another analytic tool, because they have to evidence that the therapy is effective, and that the money they're paying to employ a therapist or to run the service is being well spent. It's about value for money. For those who don't do that, I think it's just about saying to the client, when you came, you were really anxious about a job interview. Take something off the top of my head, and applying for jobs. And I wonder where you are now. And it might be they say, actually, I feel a bit better. Or they might say, I'm still a bit anxious. And you say, well, okay, what would be useful? How can I help you? And they might say, well, could we go through some scenarios? Could I talk about what would happen if I said this and they said that? And you can say, of course you can. You're there to work creatively with the client. So you could do it in two ways. But the key thing is mention it at contracting.
Yep, beautifully said. Thank you, Rory. I see the client review slightly different. So we're speaking about the tools that you were speaking about, Rory, Core, and the other assessment tools of where a client may be. Certainly, I recently dipped. Well, when I say recently, it was a bit back now, but I dipped into some personal therapy for myself, and something came up in my life, and the working was it was really a tool was used at each and every session, at the end of each and every session.
Oh,
and that worked pretty well, because it kind of tracked the session through. However, there was a separate review sat in the middle as well, outside of the tools. Because if we look at the tools, they're exactly as you said, Rory. They track certain metrics that we're measuring within a client, their well-being levels, of sleeping well, things like that, their health and well-being, and very, very smart tools. And usually those tools are useful to show that there was a positive outcome, or in some cases not a positive outcome, and they're used for funding. So they asking very specific things. What they don't ask within those tools is the working relationship and what works and what doesn't work, and the nuance of that. So even if you are using those tools, I still advise that you do a check-in with that client. And I love how you kind of said, if you're not using the tools, the way you worded the check-in you might do, when you came in 3 weeks ago, you presented and said X, Y, and Z. And I wonder how you are now, halfway through our sessions. And they're going to check in and share where they're at. And then you might put in something along the lines of, is there anything that you found particularly helpful in our work together? And just that. And that is a open question, because it's not a yes. Well, actually, they could come back and go, yes. It is an open question. It does have a yes or no answer, but it's unlikely they're going to go yes or no. They're going to give you some information which gives you an indication of what works for them. And they may say, I really enjoyed that exercise you did where you had that little box with all those different ornaments in it, and you asked me to choose one and tell you why the situation I was going through related to that, and I chose the feather, and and after it I felt lighter than the feather. That it opens up a door for us to go in and say, well, is that something you'd like to work more with? And you open the door for the client to be guiding the therapeutic process in what actually works for them. And then you can say, is there anything that we've covered here that is not helpful for you, that kind of jarred with you? So we're asking for that feedback like they would in a restaurant. And the person may say, the silences, I find them uncomfortable. I really do. I don't like the silences. I just sit there thinking, what should I say now? I don't know what to do. And then we might take that information and weave it into the therapy going forward. We might say, wow, so I hear that those silences make you feel uncomfortable. And of course, they're there therapeutically for you to kind of feel and be within those spaces. But if you're feeling uncomfortable, I wonder what might work better for you, and invite the client into being part of their therapy. So the review session really can be a tailoring process of what works, what is maybe not as effective, and at the same time gathering information that is useful for us to take to supervision, useful for the agency. And my first supervisor said when I went into placement, your clients will teach you, Kenneth, your clients will teach you. And this is a great way for our clients to teach you. When we open that door, when we put down the welcome mat and say, help me understand you and help you. It's a beautiful process, Rory.
Well said, Ken. And, as a student, you can take that feedback, take it into your supervisor and discuss it in supervision. There's a rich seam to be mined there about how you develop your practice. Because remember, your supervision is the mortar between the bricks. When you go to university or college, you're building your knowledge like you would build a wall. But supervision is the mortar in between that holds all the bricks together. So and of course, a good mortar will build a solid wall. I'm really kind of wringing this metaphor out now, but that's the truth of the matter. If you can see the nuance in working with the client, and your supervisor can help you, or your peers can help you in case discussion, then you're going to go back to your client a little bit more informed, and you're developing your practice, which is exactly what we should be doing from the moment we start practicing. We should never stop developing our practice.
Yeah. Oh, yes. So to close out this topic, reviewing clients' progress, here's an exercise that you can take and use in your skills, simulated skills session. So if you're not yet in placement, you're not yet doing these reviews, you can simulate them. You can practice them with your peers. So it would first, you would find a peer that you can say, what I'd like to do is in our skills session today, in our 40-minute skills session, and where we've got 20 minutes aside as speaker and listener, and we swap over. What I'd like to do is after 10 minutes, I'd like to do like a little mini review and ask you how that's going for you, and then you feedback, and then I'll do the rest of the session, and you can do the same for me. So you can practice these. You don't have to wait until you get into placement. No. And the other way that you can practice this is at the end of a simulated skills session. So maybe you do sit with someone for 20 minutes, and at the end of the skills session, you can do a mini review. You can say, I wonder, at the beginning you said that you were frustrated when you checked in today because of the traffic that you had to sit in to get to university today, and I wonder where you're feeling yourself now? And they can kind of feed back, and you can say, and in this session, was there anything you found particularly helpful? You can do that little mini review at the end of your simulated session, so that when you are using that in service of your clients, it's not the first time that your lips are uttering those words. So there's something you can practice.
You can rehearse it in supervision. You get 1.5 hours. You can. I think a good supervisor. I mean, I certainly when I supervised, I would say, so how do you do the review? Let's talk about your review process. What is it you use, and what was the outcome? So at all points, you're getting valuable feedback, and also you're developing that kind of very nuanced skill of listening to what the client wants, rather like the Ken's burger analogy, and making sure that you're producing, or the relationship produces exactly what the client wants. We can't always guarantee it, but we're aiming to do that. We're aiming to be the best fit for our clients. And I think the 6-week review or reviews in general are a good way of facilitating that.
Indeed, Rory. You, our listener, you were in a certain headspace, and then you decided to listen to the Counselling Tutor podcast today. I wonder where you were before listening to this podcast. I wonder how the podcast was for you. I wonder if there was anything that stood out as being helpful. I wonder if there was anything that maybe wasn't so helpful. See what I'm doing there, Rory? I'm doing a mini review.
I see what you're doing, Ken. You're doing a review, aren't you?
This has been episode 336 of the Counselling Tutor podcast.
We started with ethical and sustainable practice, talked about building a counselling CV, making sure that your curriculum vitae stands head and shoulders above the competition, and hopefully will get you that interview, some valuable tips, and I think some really solid information on CV building. In Practice Matters, we spoke to a real expert, Nicola Durrant, identifying and working with pathological demand avoidance. A real pleasure to work with someone outside the profession in a different discipline who I hope will inform our practices. Certainly informed me. Really, really useful. And certainly if you're working with autistic clients, I think pretty essential. And then finally, we talked about student services and reviewing clients' progress. There are many ways that clients' progress can be reviewed. Now, finally, thank you for your support, your subscriptions, your shares, your likes. They mean the world to me and Ken. So until next time, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.